Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to discuss the fusion of Goten and Trunks, known as Gotenks, a character who a lot of people really underrated his power, particularly with regard to Goten and Trunks, which I actually discussed in my last video. Continuing in the same train of thought with regard to these characters and their combined fusion, I wanted to discuss something that I recently thought of going back and rereading the Buu saga in the Dragon Ball manga, which I'll be showing during this video. And that comes down to a version of Gotenks that we actually never got to see in the story. One that very well could have existed in universe, and yet, for whatever different reason and circumstances, never came to appear. However, before I get into that, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That way you could stay up to date with all of my future videos just like this. Additionally, make sure to leave a like, share your own thoughts down below in the comments, share the video out, and stay the entire duration, because not only that way will you get a better understanding of what I'm talking about, but also you'll be able to help this channel to go even further beyond, to be seen by that many more people, so we can grow beyond the levels of Super Saiyan 3, 4, and Infinity in Dragon Ball Multiverse and AF. But with that being said, let's get into the video. So in order to take a look at this, we need to look back to when Goku first initially introduced the concept of fusion into the Dragon Ball story. Originally, he was mentioning it where he believed that he and Vegeta, or he and Gohan, if they had fused together using the fusion dance or Metamoran fusion technique, which of course is separate from the Potara, and I'll get into that in another video in the future, the thing would happen is that he believed they'd be powerful enough to defeat Majin Buu, and they wouldn't be able to do it individually. I actually discussed if Goku as a Super Saiyan 3 could have defeated Majin Buu in a video you guys can see in the top right corner. That's the first of many to come. Now down here, Goku explained how the fusion actually works. He says that he met some Metamorans in the afterlife, and it showed him that when two people who are the same size and have the same level of strength are able to come together and combine themselves into a single being, creating a whole new person which has an incredible power level that is way above the power that they had when they were separated. Those Metamorans were weak and small, however, after fusing, they transformed into fierce warriors, which is, I guess, basically their way that they were able to develop survival in the intergalactic kind of universe where Dragon Ball exists, where there are constant alien species interacting with one another, as well as the Saiyans, who, for all we know, were sent there in the past and got defeated by the fusions, which is why they, theoretically still existed at this point in the story. We never really go to Metamor in the main story, so for all we know, Frieza blew it up a long time ago. Now later on, Goku starts to train Goten Trunks in the ability of how to actually use this. And when he does this, what is the very first thing that Goku starts to train the two of them on? That is how to balance their ki and make it equal to one another so that they could do the fusion dance. Now, as we could see right here, Trunks initially has to lower his ki because not only is he a little bit older than Goten, but he also trained harder with Vegeta under the gravity training leading up to the Tenkaichi Budokai. Now, during this point, Goku says that there's no other way for them to fuse at this point unless the two of them are to match each other in power. However, is that actually true? Well, I'll be getting into that more in this video. Later on, Goku shows the two of them how to actually do the fusion dance and explains it one more time, saying once you two have adjusted your ki to each other, you also have to perform the fusion pose exactly identical for the fusion to be perfect. I'll show you this pose now, so look very carefully and memorize it, understood? At this point, we see that Goku actually shows them the exact technique of the fusion, as goofy as the dance is, which Piccolo and the others are saying is very lame. And then, of course, Goku asks his former rival and enemy, the Demon Lord himself at this point, and the fusion of God and the Devil, in order to do this wacky pose with him. as we see the two of them do. Now, interestingly, Goku and Piccolo do not actually fuse together during this. You could say it comes down to different factors, like they didn't perhaps balance their ki, like the two of them are two different species that are of different sizes and levels of power in general. But this is something we also see later on, when Goten and Trunks are initially trying to train for the fusion dance. The two of them have gotten to the point where essentially they have perfected the fusion dance, and yet neither of them are going to be able to fuse together doing this right now because they're not actually trying to. Piccolo once again mentions the idea that both of them need to make sure that their ki are exactly the same. Now, this is what leads to them fusing together in the first place, and us getting 3 different versions of Gotenks we see on screen. The very first one we see is actually a failed fusion, which I'll be getting even more into momentarily. As we could see, the two of them in terms of their dance are not perfect, where Goten kept his fists together, whereas Trunks pointed his fingers out before the final motion over here, which then leads to them fusing together into the fat Gotenks that we could see right here. And as we could see, he has not actually gotten much more powerful, if at all. In fact, he just trying to run a little bit completely gets gassed and runs out of energy and can't do anything. So total failure in that case. He then has to wait 30 minutes for them to defuse, and then in order for them to try again. Interestingly, it does seem like Toriyama was playing around with the fusion timer early from the start, considering the fact that in some versions of the story, or even later on, it seems like they have to wait an hour between fusions to refuse. However, they make it seem like here, every single time they defuse, they can immediately fuse again, as Piccolo is saying that every minute counts. Otherwise, he wouldn't just be like, you know, oh, so let's wait an hour and do it again. At this point, we see that Goten and Trunks once again fuse together, but as we could see right here, their fingers are once again off, with Goten and Trunks not having full connection on the bottom, which leads to them fusing again into yet another failed fusion, which is the skinny, old-looking one. Now, interestingly, as I mentioned in another video that you guys can see in the top right corner about Evil Boo and his strength, the different failed forms of Gotenks, such as the fat one and the skinny, older-looking one, seem to parallel what we see from Boo later on, where he splits into the fat good Boo and the evil wrath Boo, who is skinny and, you know, looks like Earthworm Jim. Additionally, when the two of them come together one more time in what seems like a perfect fusion for Boo, they become Super Boo. Whereas we see here, when Goten and Trunks actually get the fusion perfect, we see that they become Gotenks in his actual strongest form as his base before he transforms into Super Saiyan, which he can't actually do at this point because he hasn't figured out how to transform into a Super Saiyan after going from his base fusion into, of course, you know, transformation. Now, during this, of course, Gotenks did perfect it. We saw 3 different versions of the fusion, and we also see this mirrored and echoed with other versions of fusion, such as Gogeta. Like in Fusion Reborn, when Goku and Vegeta fuse together and they become Veku, the fat Gogeta. And then the same thing happens in Dragon Ball Super Broly, where they become the fat Gogeta, Veku again, and they also become the skinny, old-looking one right here that we could see too, before eventually becoming the full power, correct version of Gogeta. But again, there's another fusion that perhaps Gogeta could have become, just like Gotenks could have become. And that comes down to another dysregularity, let's say, another mistake or another failure that Goten and Trunks never actually make trying to fuse at any point in the story, or Goku and Vegeta don't seem to do either, which is if the two of them actually were to attempt to fuse when their ki was not exactly the same. In other words, what if Goten and Trunks, when they tried to become Gotenks in the story right here, they actually had differing keys? Like, let's say for a brief moment, Goten or Trunks fluctuated their ki signature to where Goten was weaker than Trunks. Let's say that Trunks wanted to show off in his arrogant way and was like, I'll try and fuse with him and show just how powerful I am, and then I will in turn be stronger than Goten and we'll fuse together into a stronger fusion. What exactly would have happened at that point if the two of them attempted to fuse? Would the fusion have simply not worked? Or perhaps would they have become another variation of Gotenks, just like we could say would happen with Gogeta if they tried to fuse with dysregulated ki, where the disparity between the two would create some weird amalgamation either of the fat in the skinny one, or perhaps it would be some weird deformed version of Gotenks in which, maybe some of him would be fat, some of him would be thin, one arm would be longer, one leg would be longer, he would I don't know, just have a variety of different things that could happen. Or perhaps is there something much worse that would happen, where if the two of them tried to fuse together into Gotenks when they did not have ki that perfectly matched one another because they weren't either suppressing themselves in the case of Trunks, or they simply didn't train to match it up as we see with the time chamber onward, well, would perhaps maybe the ki be so discorrelated with one another, so violent in the particular form of fusion that it would actually cause them to explode when it happens. Kind of like what we saw with Goku, where he said if he loses control of the Kaioken, it could lead to him dying, his ki basically catching fire and exploding and destroying him because he didn't have the correct ki control at the time. That's definitely something that we could see possibly happening because of the fact that we know this is such a powerful technique that takes two kids who are already really powerful, as I talked about in that video I referenced before, and made them as a Super Saiyan more powerful than even Goku in his most powerful form at the time. That goes to show you that what Goku said here about these Metamorans not being super powerful when they were individuals, but then being incredibly powerful and skilled when they became a fusion would go that much further in the idea of just how powerful this technique is and just how dangerous or even deadly it would be if the two different characters did not properly synchronize their ki. However, there is another possibility that the fusion technique simply wouldn't even work if Goten and Trunks attempted to do it, but their ki was not correct, like we could see right here. Right here, as we see, Goku says that in order to fuse, you must have exactly the same ki levels. Additionally, when we look at, for instance, the dialogue that Goku uses when he's explaining to Piccolo how fusion works, he says it's a technique that two people of the same, emphasis on same size, and have the same, again, emphasis, level of strength can use. So it's entirely possible that just like here, Goten and Trunks would not even be able to fuse just the same way that Piccolo and Goku wouldn't be able to fuse because the difference in ki is equivalent to the difference in mass and size and everything like that. And remember, as Piccolo mentions right here, they need to make both their ki exactly the same when they're going to fuse together. So again, we see this idea put into place time and time again, where you must have exactly the same ki levels in order to fuse, which sounds a lot like a prerequisite, which means that there's a strong chance that even if Goten and Trunks did not have the exact same level of ki when they tried to fuse and merge their powers and everything into one another, then they simply would never even be able to become Gotenks or anything. They would just be doing a weird, goofy dance and be just as embarrassed as we see that Piccolo is right here. And funny enough, Piccolo also makes mention of the fact that Vegeta never would have gone along with the idea because of how embarrassing the pose was, which is something that Vegeta confirms later on because he actually witnessed things happening from the afterlife after his death, and then returned to Earth and rejected the idea when Goku brought it up to him. However, considering the fact that Goku mentions the idea of needing to have everything being perfect to do the fusion, and then we see Goten and Trunks mess up multiple times, and Goku and Vegeta also mess up multiple times when they are trying to become Gogeta, that there definitely is a possibility that this could have generated another version of Gotenks that we never really saw. In which case, I think it would be interesting to possibly see that in the future, especially with the now grown-up versions of Goten Trunks, and then in turn be able to see maybe another really funny scene, or perhaps getting something entirely different out of it than we ever expected. Okay guys, so that is the version of Gotenks we never saw. Let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. What do you think about this concept? Do you think that perhaps they would have become a different form of Gotenks, or the fusion never would have activated and worked in the first place? Let me know down below. Also, one more time, if you're new here, consider subscribing, enabling all notifications. That way you could see all my future video streams and that much more. Make sure to leave a like, share this video out, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.